People, deluded. I'm back again. I've got a very special guest with a very interesting story. We're gonna pick his brains and hopefully you lot enjoy everything. Temisan, how you doing, my friend? Appreciate
I'm
you.
doing brilliant, CJ. I love the intro, by the way.
Thank
That's
you.
really good. Yeah, the intro looking good. Looking good. I like it.
Thank you, man. Thank you. As long as I'm doing something right. But yeah, for those who don't know, I mean, this man's got an interesting story. You're gonna find out everything in this, however long we're here. Well, let's start from the beginning, man. Tell us your name, where you're from, all of that kind of stuff, my brother.
Sure. So, Temisan Williams, born and bred London, and my journey has been in academy coaching. I've been in academy coaching for 10 plus years, but I've been a coach overall for about 15 years.
Where did it start? Like, obviously, as you said, you've been, best part of 15 years, but where did it start? What was that kind of first initial thought that, you know what, I'm going to give coaching a go? And where was that? What point in your life was you at?
So, I remember when I was 14 and they had Bonito, where there was a
Hey,
3v3.
nostalgia.
Yeah, 3v3, Ronaldinho, Figo, all those guys. And I went to me and some friends, we went to try and, get to tournaments, all that type of stuff. And when we played, I thought, my goodness, there are some decent
Always.
players out there. And so I said to myself, do you know what? It's probably unlikely I'm going to be able to make it to professional football. I had other experiences, played in college, played first in my university, and I decided, you know what? I want to be able to help players who want to make it all the way. I want to be able to be a part of that process. And so the next best thing was a coach. So as a coach, I can help the dreams come true of those who want to play in the top level of the game.
That's a good start to it, man. And you kind of made me go back in time. Like, what you said with the Jogo Bonito thing is that I've got ambitions to be a footballer, but there's serious levels here. Like,
There are
I'm miles
ballers
off
out there. There really are. And, I think that was probably the good thing for me to realize very early on, have that self reflection and say, do you know what? Tell me, you can play, but not to this level. And so I said, do you know what? Coaching it is.
I hear that. What position were you?
I played right wing, actually.
Oh,
So I was
everyone's a winger and a striker,
I was
man.
good. I was quick. I was quickish, quickish. But I ended up actually getting an injury um, during my time, and so I ended up sometimes playing centre back. I was definitely one of the smaller centre backs. I'm not 6 foot, so it was more of a Cannavaro Martinez centre back vibe.
I'm with you, man. I was a striker at like under eights, and then by the end of my playing careers, like obviously I played Sunday league, I ended up at as a fullback. No one wants to be a fullback. Maybe with the present days, a bit different, but yeah,
Yeah,
I just wanted to know. I want to ask you though. Okay, so you at 14, the spark has started. Now you're thinking about
yeah.
coaching, you're thinking about other careers. Was there a voice in your head that would shut it off, like coaching isn't a viable source of income or making a living? Like, how long was it before you said, you know what, 2 feet in, I'm gonna make something of this?
So interestingly, for your listeners, I was actually on the pathway to becoming a doctor. So
Oh,
that
this
was
is
actually,
interesting.
yeah. So that was what I decided to do. I was doing biomedical science degree. I ended up finishing that, but midway through, I said, "Do you know what? I don't want to be a doctor." Ultimately, if I did it, of course, you go through many years of training, etc. And I didn't want to go down that path. So I said, "Do you know what? I know that I want to be in football. I know that I want to be coaching." And so as soon as I finished my degree, I was already in. I was already in. I didn't even think about the financial aspects of it. For me, it was a case of this is what I know I want to do. There's nothing else I want to do. I'm going all in.
I mean, I think everybody, I assume everyone in your personal life can like obviously see that this is a viable career and you're doing your thing and you're getting bigger and bigger. But was there any like did the external influences play any sort of part? Obviously, you've shown the courage to just do it regardless, but I'm sure there must have been family like, hang on, doctor's a good job, you've got a good thing going here. Hang on, why are you going about coaching? Because 100% that has to have happened.
Yeah, of course. I think for me the biggest thing was, saying to my parents, look, I'm not going to be a doctor. And obviously at the time, being a doctor was something quite prestigious. And I just had to be honest. I just had to be honest. And just doing that and them saying, "Do you know what? Okay." And my mom saying, "Well, I knew you wanted to go down this path anyway."
Mum
It
knows
was
best, man.
She did. She definitely did. And so for me, it was the tick box that okay, I'm going for this.
So you've decided you're not being a doctor. Family's
Yeah.
cool with it. Most importantly, you're ready to go down this path. What was the first role that you walked into in terms of coaching?
Sure. So the first role, it was actually a men's side, and I had to search on FA website, all that type of stuff, and they were linked to a local church, and they were called Hub Athletic. Interestingly, one of the players who people now know in UK was Mo the comedian. He was
Wow, it's
actually
funny how things work. So it
he,
must be South, like a South London based club based on that.
yeah, they were South London. Yeah, they were down in Lambeth North. Top top players, like really good players actually. One or two of them had previously played in academies, and it was a good experience for me because some of the players were obviously older than me because I started at 21. So some were as young as 16, but then you had those who were the same age or older than me. And being my first role in coaching, you had to find your voice quickly
Very
because
quickly.
they will tell you if you don't know what you're doing. And that was a really great training ground for me. Not only that, but I was also able to go across to South Africa and actually lead on a coach
Wow.
education development. Yes, after 2 years, that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Loved being in South Africa. Coached in a government settlement called Cosmo City,
Wow.
and when they talk about the difference between poverty and those who are wealthy, like we were staying in the government settlement where we stayed in the shanty town right opposite you would see $1 million mansions. Like it was
Wow.
crazy, it was crazy. And we were training on like red dust dirt, and but it was, I loved it, go back in a heartbeat.
How much did that shape your, like, how much did that early experience in South Africa, whether it was the pitch, like the
Yeah,
environment and just everything around it, how much did that shape any of your footballing principles from a coaching aspect, if anything?
firstly it was to be humble and to really appreciate the opportunities that we have here. When people say there's not really opportunities here in the UK, I'm sorry, no,
That's a
I don't
different
agree.
world.
I don't agree with that at all. Yeah, there were coaches over there in the shantytown who still wanted to achieve their UEFA A license. I just couldn't see how they were able to go and do it at the time. But in UK, you can definitely see a pathway how you can get to UEFA A license, as an example. So that's the first thing. Then just the joy of the players and the community. There was such a great community feel, and the way they could play. I remember we played. Okay, we played. I don't know what it was. Maybe 7v7, 6v6, 8v8, and the ball was bouncing everywhere. And I remember I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm going to go and press this player, etc." The gap, CJ, the gap must have been like this between my feet, and he still managed to nutmeg me. It just, still to this day, it baffles me. I was like, how are you able
How
to
did
do
you work
this?
that one?
Yeah. But I think that was where it really started to show to me how important it is that players play in these types of environments. So obviously back here in the UK, on concrete, things whereby it's not going to be a flush pitch,
It's not
because
ideal
this is where
conditions.
exactly these are where really exciting, skillful players are created, and seeing that is something. I know we'll talk about it later on. For me, it's a bit of a shame that you don't see that as much anymore. My childhood was growing up, playing concrete, playing in the parks, etc. Nowadays, probably more and more players, theirs is very structured. So if you're in an
Almost too
academy,
perfect.
yeah, you're in an academy, and then probably outside of that, you're then playing in a goals whereby there's a private session, and then you're probably playing off season in tournaments that are already structured. So where do you get those opportunities now where you're actually playing on the streets and
Facts.
everyone's saying car, stop the game?
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Well, if you want a free kick, you actually have to pick up the ball and grab the free kick for yourself, which probably goes
exactly.
into like the physical aspects of it.
Yeah, and for me, what I really loved about obviously those experiences is it didn't even matter about your age. If you're 3 years, 4 years younger, you had to find a way to still be able to play with the players around you.
Mix it.
There was a
Yeah.
mixture of, had girls, boys playing together, and I'd love to see more and more of that, if possible.
Side note, but do you think that kind of side of football is kind of going? Because I don't really see kids playing in the park or like I remember my childhood, we'd play. Well, I assume you're from South, so you lot probably call it 66. We call it 60 seconds. Like we'll be
Yeah,
playing
call it
that.
60 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, thank the Lord, man. You call
Yeah.
it 60 seconds. We got another real one, but like, the 60 seconds, the Wembleys, the Wembley doubles, the,
Yeah.
goal to goal.
Goal to
You don't,
goal.
yeah,
Jeezy
all
me.
of these things. Like,
CJ,
listen, that was my childhood, man. That is nostalgic, man. Like playing on makeshift pitches, or you'd almost make a pitch. Like, how do I explain it? It's like you have a car park where it's like it's got one exit, and you kind of make that goal. The ball kind of, you kind of have
Yes,
to
yes.
pitch kind of curves. Like, I think
We
that's
used to
gone.
find so we used to find the whether it be Sainsbury's or Tesco
Yeah,
and we would turn them on their side, and especially when it was Jogger Benito, we have this small futsal ball,
it's
and we'd be able to
nostalgic, man.
play with that.
This
You'd
is
be
what I'm talking
creative.
about.
Yeah,
Pardon
you'd
me.
be creative. You'd be creative
And that's and
as
that's
a young
and that's the
player.
thing with creativity. Like, do you like? It feels like it's gone, but we'll get onto that in a second, man. I
Sure.
want to stay on task, man, or I'll just be waffling about my childhood, man. So yeah, obviously, you've been in South Africa. You're now progressing in your career. What did
Yeah.
you do after that kind of commenced?
So after that, I had a really great opportunity to coach at a girls' centre of excellence. So this Cambridge Girls' Centre of Excellence, and we played against teams such as Arsenal, Aston Villa, etc. And that was a really good experience for me to understand what it takes to start actually working coaching at a higher level. Really, really top players there within that academy, and then from there was really, if you like, the quantum leap, because I went from there to Tottenham Academy as a apprentice coach. My goodness, still to this day, the level, I think I was highly privileged to be there at that time, because the coaches
Was
who were
this the new
there.
ground or at Chigwell?
This was
Side
at the
note.
new ground.
Okay.
But before that, I did have two opportunities to go to Chigwell, and I spent a day with Kieran McKenna and Alex Inglethorpe. Who
Wow.
Kieran McKenna obviously at Ipswich, Alex Inglethorpe, who's the head of academy at Liverpool.
Big
Scott
names.
Parker was there as well at the time. He was doing his badges, and then a year or two later, I was able to go to the new ground. But the coaches you had there were like Justin Cochrane, who's obviously Brentford and is now
Big
at
him up.
England first team. Like I mentioned, Kieran McKenna. You got Matthew Wells, who first team at Tottenham. Mehmet, who's at Arsenal on 21. So just stellar coaches there, as well as Chris Ramsey and John McDermott, who's now at England. And the level at which they coached at, but not just that, technique of each coach was unbelievable. They could demonstrate just like that. And for me, it really highlighted as a coach how important it is to be able to demonstrate, if you can, of course, but to be able to demonstrate, because it spoke volumes.
That's a good side note. You mentioned it, demonstration, because I think back in like my coaching days, you have to be obviously able to demonstrate. But what if you don't have like the technical level, like the crisp of the past, like to demonstrate exactly how you would want it, how the academy players to do it? How do you go about that if somebody is unable to do it?
Sure. If I'm being honest, the first thing is practice. If you've
Yeah,
got,
that's a good point. Yeah,
I'll be honest. If you've got a garden in, in the house, you've got a garden, or if you can just go to the park. Me, at times, I went to the local park to practice a bit, because I knew that I wasn't getting that in. I wasn't doing five-a-side regularly, etc. And because of my injury, it then limited parts of what I could do. So I said to myself, well, I can't make the excuses. This is what is at this level. I've got to still practice in some way, shape, or form to be able to make sure I can demonstrate to a certain level. And I think if you want to coach at that level in academies, I think it's an important part of your repertoire to be able to do so. However you can do it. Of course, if you've got injury whereby you actually can't kick the ball appropriately, you'd get the players to then demonstrate for you. But where possible, definitely I would say try to do it.
so what did you learn the most at Spurs?
The most I learned at Spurs was it sort of broke the mold of what I was learning as a B license coach. So I was going for my UEFA B license at that time, and I remember, and I posted about this actually on LinkedIn. I'll always remember there was a session that Justin Cochran was doing. I said, okay, what we're doing today? He said adjusting angles. I said, I don't get this. What do you mean adjusting angles? Those weren't topic sessions in my UEFA B license. It was, okay, teaching a wide play, attacking wide play with fullback overlapping, etc. And he said that, well, when I went to Arsenal game and Ozil was playing at Arsenal at the time, he said wherever the ball was, Ozil just adjusted his angle by 2 yards, 3 yards, and he said that's what I'm helping the players to do today, to understand how to adjust their angles by a yard, 2 yards. And when he was doing the practice, he was like, "Oh, he'd pause it, stop it. You need to move. You should have moved 1 yard there. You should have moved 2 yards here." That really opened my mind to what it is to help players to progress to elite football. It's those minute details and going beyond just what you've learned on your coaching badges.
That's a good, interesting point as well, because obviously there has to be a framework that, like you said, you're going for the UEFA courses. There are obviously some
Yeah.
things you have to do by the book, but then also, I guess there's a degree of doing it off the cuff, learning a bit from this coach, that coach, this one, and like adding it all and making your own like cocktail of coaching. Like, how much of a learning curve is it? Like, how much times do you go through where you think you know something, and then you might see something that makes you think everything you thought you know was kind of a lie, and I need to learn again? Like, how much of a learning curve is it as, for a coach, really?
If I'm honest, every single academy I went to, I ended up having that. When I went so from Tottenham, when I went to Southend, when I went to Fulham, when I went to Arsenal, at each point I was like, I've got to learn something completely different to some degree than I thought I knew. Than I
Different
thought I knew.
ethoses.
So it's different ethos, but also different understanding of how to help players to learn in terms of how you're setting up your practices. Each and every point tested me in a different way, and I think it was really positive. I'm happy that it wasn't the same experience all the way through, because I think I'm a much better coach because of that, and a much more adaptable coach. And that's the key. You've got to be adaptable as a coach, otherwise you're going to find it hard pressed to be able to survive.
I think you're bang on the money, man. You've got to be, from what you've said here, I've got that if anyone that wants to be a coach is listening, you've got to be susceptible to change. So being adaptable, you have to be comfortable with not knowing stuff. You have to do your homework as much as the players. So it's quite interesting hearing a coach say this sort of stuff. So you've gone from Cambridge, you've gone to Spurs.
Yeah.
Where did you go after Spurs?
So after Spurs, I went to Southend. Loved it. Absolutely loved Southend. And I always tell coaches that don't just think about working at the Category 1 Premier League academies. I learned an incredible amount at Southend, who at the time Cat 3, they were they were League 1 club at the time as well. Of course, they don't have the facilities as your Premier League academies. There were
100%.
times where there was one time where I trained with the assistant coach 26 players on a quarter pitch, and these are under 15s, and you're
Wow.
trying to you're trying to still help them to progress forwards.
Really got to be adaptable then, man.
Exactly. And what I really loved about being at Southend is you had to do the uppermost to try and maximize what we had, the players that were there, the opportunities we could provide. So there were times where we play against Cat Ones, so we play against Tottenham, we play against the Cat Twos like Watford, and you wanted to still make sure that the players could compete at that level. And at the time, I think there was quite a number of players who either got sold on to other clubs before they got into the youth team, or progressed right the way through to the first team. And it was pleasing for me to see the number of players at the time that I was there, and even left when I went to Fulham, see how many of them actually progressed through to the first team. Probably one of the most known players was Drew Yearwood, who ended up going
Oh,
to, he
he's in
got
America
sold to
now, something.
Brentford. Yeah, he then went to the New York Red Bulls as well, and now he's I think down with Houston, but he would end up going to America. But he had a fantastic journey, even though there were many road bumps along the way. But it was great to see, for example, where he could progress to from being at a club like Southend.
Obviously, being at a club like Southend, or just mentioning what you just mentioned with the former player, obviously, I'm pretty sure there's people that know nothing about football that could see like a Jadon Sancho, or we'll get onto him, but an Ethan
Yeah.
Wanyeri, they're Bobby Dazzlers, they're going to be amazing. But has there been any players that you've seen, or anyone in general that you've looked at and you thought, oh, you know what? it's not that you don't rate them or whatever, but you didn't think that was going to happen. Or I guess what I'm trying to ask you is there anyone that surprised you, or how much of how many times do you get surprised as a coach seeing what players have gone on and done?
You get surprised all the time because ultimately we do have our biases, whether we like it or not. We do want to say, okay, for each player, they can go wherever wherever it may take them, their footballing may take them. But there were players. I'll be honest, Drew actually, I was actually surprised, and the reason why I was surprised was because at under 15, his position was changed from right winger to central midfield player to help him with his technical development. Usually, of course, there's a certain level of technical development from a younger age to progress forward, but that decision that was made ended up meaning that he was in the first team by 17. And I did not, I'll be honest, I did not see that. I didn't see that happening. And obviously, where he ended up progressing to. There was actually of recent, there is a player who, when I was at Fulham, you probably would have said he's not one of the best technically, maybe bottom of the group, but he actually left Fulham. He went to Reading and then he got sold. He got sold by Reading. Is now at a Premier League club at Southampton. And I saw it the other day. I was like, good on you, good on you.
Well done,
You
isn't
know,
it?
yeah. I was like, well done to see where your journey now, and the same players in his age group who I know are no longer in academies.
That's the saddest thing, man. Like that's also a very sad thing. I think you touched on two things there. I always think changing a position can change your reality. Like I think Trent
Yeah,
Alexander-Arnold went from playing centre mid to right back. It's fair to
yeah,
say he's done all right. But then you said it there. It's like for everyone that makes it, some are not playing the game. As you know yourself, there's a lot of people who drop out the game. I would say very early, but I think the
yeah,
most
yeah.
depressing thing for me is like when they get that first pro contract and then unfortunately they're not in the game. How important is it, like, I guess, giving these guys life skills? Because as much as I would love every footballer to make it, the
Yeah.
chances are slim.
Very slim in terms of the percentages. It's approximately, so Sidemen had their charity match the other day. 90,000, approximately nine would make it as professional
Wow.
football players. Nine. So really, what we're doing in academies is helping players to be better grassroots players, because ultimately they're going, even in academies, 90% are going to come out, and then of those who get their first pro contract, 76% don't get the second. So the numbers just become increasingly smaller. And that's why it's critical. And you talked about life skills. One of the things that I think academies should do is every single player must learn another language.
Why don't they do that?
Ultimately, good question. Some may say time, because obviously they come with training, etc. But if you're trying to prepare them for the elite game, you're going to be immediately, if you, so like an Ethan, by the time, of course we speak English here in the change room, obviously English, but if he wants to then transition to if he doesn't, but maybe he plays at another club later on in his career. Obviously you see Gareth Bale, for example, go to Spain. You've seen Adamola Lookman go to
Many a country, really.
go to Syria, and many others. It helps them to be able to assimilate within their country in terms of the changing room, lingo, talk, and just in life in general. Even if they don't end up being a professional football player, it means that life is broader for them for opportunities that they may want to do. Many young coaches who I speak to, one of the first things they want to do after university is, can I go and have a 3 month abroad somewhere else? And if you know you can speak another language to a certain degree, it makes it a lot easier.
I think you're bang on the money, man. And I think I would go as far as to say that I always think football mirrors society. I think as in Britain, we could do with learning another language. I know in school
Agreed.
you learn the language, but it's not really, it's not that serious, but it's not that really deep.
Let's
I
be
think
honest, it is. It isn't. It's not
it's
put
a
as
joke
serious
thing. Yeah,
as it should be, because of the fact that everyone else around the world is learning English, but we forget that they are then bilingual. We are
exactly.
not. They're bilingual. We're not. And when you look at the top level game as well, all of the managers, they're all bilingual. All of them.
Many a language. You look at someone like
Yeah.
Una Emery, even Mikel Arteta. Actually, half of these managers, like you'd be pushed to find one that doesn't speak a minimum of two. I would even go as far to say at the Prem level, there's about 4 or 5. And as you said, it helps
Yeah.
you adapt. It helps you convey your ideas. I guess as a coach, I guess some things like if I have an Italian, a Spaniard, and an English coach, more than anything, I might be able to communicate, but it's like my emotions behind the words might hit
Yes.
different if I know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about in terms of the language. And obviously, that's going to get a reaction. So that's an interesting point. That should be compulsory. Do you think when you get to about 15, 16, could there be more around like, how can I make it make sense? Like general life skills, like, you know, whether you're going to be like, should the academies do workshops around like plumbing, around business, around, or probably around coaching in sport and just other things to
Mm,
prepare you for if you're not going to be a footballer? Because as you said, out of 90,000 or whatever you said, like there's only 9 going to make it. The numbers are not good. And everybody, even myself, and I'm not a footballer and I wouldn't play for an academy, I thought I'm going to be that one anyways. And in
yeah,
the end,
yeah,
it can't
yeah,
happen for everyone.
yeah. So one of the other things I would say is financial literacy, a thousand
Exactly.
percent. But I think financial literacy needs to start from right the way from when they actually come into the academy. I don't think it can wait until they are under 18s. I think they've got to know from under nines the very basics. You've got things like Go Henry, have an understanding of, okay, when you get your pocket money, what do you do with it? Start
Yeah.
understanding around investing. Start, things like cryptocurrency, etc. Having someone coming in to talk about these things, because ultimately, whoever you are in life, finances is going to be one of
Make
the
or
core
break, man.
things. Yeah, they're going to be one of the core things in your life. So you want to know that you're understanding a skill that is going to help you going forwards. And if you obviously become a professional football player, then immediately you get dropped 25K a week in your bank account. You know exactly how you're going to be deploying those finances and how you're managing it. One of the things I absolutely loved was I had a player who I'd coached at Southend. He's actually now playing professionally. I ended up doing some pre-season training for him when he then moved on to another club. And we had a talk, and one of the things he said to me is, "Oh yeah, do you know one of the first one I did? Actually, I invested in Tesla stock, and this was years ago."
Wow.
And the car that he had, it wasn't anything flash. I was like,
Good on
"Okay,
him, man.
good on you, good on you. I love that. I love that." And then there are players who have coached and they've gone on and actually started their own successful private academy business. So for me, I think definitely that's a absolutely critical skill for them to be able to have. And then you talked about some of the trades. Look, at the end of the day, when it comes to blue collar trades, you're always going to be in with opportunities, especially when you're looking at the UK and the amount of houses, for example, being built. If you can, from electricians to, like I said, plumbing, you could do very well there. And so for me, I would definitely say that these are additional skills that they need to learn. Of course, I know in academies they don't want to take too much away from the focus on football. I get that, but the reality is what we know, that the majority will not be playing professionally, um, either at your parent club or outside of that. So I do think that there's a responsibility in that regards.
Even if you do go all the way and you know you play from, I think they say the average of a footballer's lifespan from a footballing sense is 9 years. But even if you go from 18 to 35, unfortunately, nothing lasts forever. Football is going to be done, so you're going to need something else,
Yeah, yeah,
regardless of how you shape it. So
yeah.
I think
And
you're
when
bang on the money.
when money when many are actually starting to really progress in their career at 35, you've come to the end.
Exactly. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
That's weird from a footballing sense, you know, when you life sense when you think about it. Yeah.
yeah, many are really starting to get into their stride at 35, and then it really starts to get to that peak and pivotal time 45 onwards, where football players already done, and that's why it's good to see, like for example, Gary Neville. He talked about it where he was actually looking at blueprints for homes and hotels while he was playing at Man United, but he was hiding it because Alex Ferguson wouldn't want them to do that. But now he's got, what is it, 400 million,
Business
pound,
mogul, really.
yeah, property portfolio. He's doing extremely well. And for example, Stephen Corker, and he's talked a lot about his journey in um, in football and talked about addiction, gambling, etc. Again, these are things. If you had that financial literacy, potentially that could have helped during that time, when he was going through that. So that's something that I think is absolutely critical.
What do you think in the money? The money, well, we all know the money in football is crazy, but it's like you
Yeah,
see kids as young as 13, 14 getting offers, depending on where they are. You know, we'll buy your mum a house, we'll give your mum and dad a
yeah,
job,
yeah,
we'll do
yeah,
this,
yeah.
we'll do that. I guess from a lifestyle point of view, like if I part the kid off for a sec, if you've got parents, which let's face it, they either come from 9 times out of 10 low income households or just normal. I don't like the word
Hmm.
normal, but normal modest kind of salaries.
Yeah.
When this kind of money is being thrown at you, even if your kid is not gonna make it, like I guess it's got to be somewhat tempting. Like, how much of a danger do you feel that aspect is in football?
Look, it's very difficult at the end of the day if you you know that potentially your child could end up making life changing money
Essentially, yeah, that's what
for
it is.
them. Yeah, it would be life changing, and I think it'd be you'd be hard pressed to say that it wouldn't impact, of course, parents at times. Now, I think this is where the parents' education comes in. I know Mars Lewis Skelly's mum,
Oh, his mum's doing the
Marcia's
Lord's
doing
work, man.
fantastic. Yeah, she's doing brilliant stuff through Number One Fan Club and helping parents and educating parents. I think that's key. Again, that education continuously for parents, not just when you're nearing the time of actually being able to get a professional contract. Again, right from the beginning, so that parents have that clarity, have those expectations as well, curated accordingly. But you will always get, obviously, those parents who are edgy when it gets to that point. It's like, okay, you're on the cusp of getting a 10K, 15K a week contract, and they've come from a household where traditionally they haven't had that amount of money. And this is where, also, we could talk about agents as an example. How are agents supporting this, and how are they? And I know there's some really great agents out there who are really trying to help families go through this, go through these experiences as well as can be, and manage expectations accordingly as well.
I think as it goes back to what you said, and I guess at all levels in life, let alone football, I guess it just goes to financial literacy, and it's only in terms of money. I mean, every week you're seeing record profits printed in the Premier League and in football in general,
Yeah,
so it's only going to get worse. So you could argue for parents, for young players, it's never been more important to have your head screwed on, or at least attempt to get your head screwed on and try and seek that kind of knowledge. Because if you live in a bubble and that bubble bursts, you're in a lot of trouble. I want to kind of ask you a question about academy football. Then, like, typically,
yeah.
it's what training 3 times a week, match on a weekend. Obviously, the players that's demanding, but how much of a strain is that on a parent? Because again, this is all assuming that parents only have one kid take it and one kid's responsibility. If you're in North London like myself, you're playing for either Arsenal or Spurs, but I could be in North playing for Crystal Palace and my mum
Yeah.
has to take me up there. She might not drive. She has to get me up there 3, 4 times a week. Obviously, I might have siblings. She's still got to cook. She's still got to prepare for dinner and whatnot. How difficult is it in that regards for academy parents and players, really?
Parents do an incredible amount. CJ, they do an incredible amount, and I do think that they need to be recognized for that even more so, for what they do. We wouldn't have academies if parents didn't
Yeah, we'd be in
provide.
trouble.
Exactly, exactly. So I definitely think that parents need to be appreciated more for the amount of time they spend. I know of parents who have had two children within the academy, and they are there 7 days a week. Um,
Wow.
I, yeah,
Wow. Wow.
and
Wow.
imagine that's continuous whilst you also working, whilst you also have other children. And I've spoken to people where they're now older and they say their siblings hate football because their experiences in life were dictated by when their sibling had a game and they had training and they had to go with them. So I would definitely say that some of the things that can be helped in academies is when parents come, are there spaces whereby they can do, for example, meetings for work? Are there quiet rooms for them to be able to do that? For the siblings, is there places where they can sit down and do their homeworks, or actually places where they can just have fun? And I think these are things that can be thought about, especially when you have an incredible budget for your academy set up, like obviously a lot of the bigger clubs do. And then I would say in terms of some clubs, they definitely have a great setup when it comes to workshops. So I remember when I was at Fulham, there was a organization called Kaizen who ended up coming, and they actually did workshop on how to help your child who is talented if you are not talented. in the same way. So that really helped them to
It's a good way
understand
of
that.
looking at it, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was brilliant. I wasn't in the workshop, but I thought, okay, that's a great title for parents to consider, and how they support their children in this talent pathway. So I would definitely say that that support is needed. It's of course a sacrifice, a big one. I know there are clubs, of course, who provide, whether it be minibuses, whether it be cabs for players to get to training. And at the end of the day, if a player is coming an hour and a half away, success is maybe them getting there 6 o'clock, even though training starts at 5:30.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's what many people don't understand. People will just see it as you're late, but at the end of the day, they're still kind of making that commitment with all the issues. You touched on something there, yeah, and I kind of want to hone in a bit on it, yeah, and it's a bit of a different one. Obviously, if
Sure.
I just assume I get into an academy at, let's just say, 8 years of age, and I'm all the way to 16, how many footballers, even the ones that make it, do you reckon, quote unquote, stop enjoying football because you're seeing friends get released? I guess you might be a Jogo Bonito kind of player, and obviously you have to learn tactics and whatnot, but that's kind of being coached out of you. People are going to hog the ball versus people are going to be less selfish. At the end of the day, to a degree, it is crabs in a barrel, and you know better than me, there is an underlying degree of politics in football. It's a funny old game of opinions. It's like, how much of football really is enjoyable from like 9 years of age, probably to about when you're, under 16s, when it's time for scholarships and
Mm.
things of that ilk.
I think ask the players. That's the first thing. Ask the players how they finding it. Are you enjoying training? If you're not enjoying training, at the end of the day, and your time at the academy, then academy's doing something wrong, ultimately. So that's definitely the first thing. Have I seen players who have dropped out because of different reasons? Yes, I've seen a player who said, after, even though he was the best, considered the best player, he'd been in academy under 9s, under 16s, and he said, I don't want to play anymore.
He's worn out.
Yeah, he didn't want to play anymore, and because of making that decision, that meant another player got their scholarship and they ended up playing first team.
It's
And
sad.
it is very sad. It was, because he was a great kid. He's now mid 20s, and it'd be interesting to see what he's doing now. But that was a decision that he made. There's others who I know who decided, actually, too many of my mates, they're going to university. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna now go university as well. There's even been one who I know of, and he was at a Premier League academy, and said, I think I've got a better pathway going through, very bright player, going through university. I think maybe going to somewhere like a Harvard, etc. So I think that's a better pathway for me. And so decided not to take a scholarship to then go follow that pathway. So you do find players who make those decisions, or even at that particular club say, actually, I'm not going to take my scholarship here. I'm going to go to another club to pick up my scholarship.
That's interesting, man. And I guess if it works out, it works out. But I just think to a degree, I just think it's sad because like my dream was just to be a footballer, and it just, from that example, it's like you're so close to touching that dream, and then
Yeah.
it's not giving up, but you've let it go in it. And I wonder if, obviously, no matter how great life works out, if you'll always think about what could have been, it could have been better, and it also kind of could have been worse. Like, I want to ask you something as well, yeah. Like, obviously, once you get to that scholar age, and then you get into that, you've played under 18s for a while, and then you're in the 21s, where, like I always say in my videos, it's like you're quote unquote too good for the 21s, and you're training with
Yes.
the first team, but for a
Yep.
variety of reasons, you're not necessarily part of the first team. So you're in that kind of mid-range. Like, how many footballers get caught in that trap? And like, do you think there could be something done around that, or is it just the belly of the beast?
Good question. So, of course, every player's got a different development pathway. For some, it's stay at the club. For some, it's go on loan and go on multiple loans. For some, it's go into the first team at an earlier age, as we've seen with many players. And of course, if we talk about Arsenal, we've seen it with Ethan, with Miles, even Aiden Heaven, who's of course gone across to Man United now. The under 21s is an interesting place, because you're not necessarily playing competitive football, and I think you need to, as much as possible, get that experience where actually something is on the line, 3 points is on the line, relegation is on the line, promotions on the line, someone's
Results.
mortgage, etc., is on the line. That you have to win. You have to compete for places, for people who have against players who've had 100 games, 200 games. No, it's on a case by case basis, of course, but I think the earlier at times, I think the earlier the better. I've done a little bit of research myself on this. If you look at the club that a player came through in terms of their parent club, if they're not in and around the first team by about age 18, it's increasingly rare that they will then be able to have a career at that same club. The only exceptions that I've really seen in on a bigger scale to this is Chelsea when they had the embargo. So
Yeah,
that's where Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, Reece James, Mason Mount was 19. You had a lot of them come through at that time to then be able to play at the first team. And of course, you had someone who'd played there as well, and legend and Frank Lampard. So that's one of the things that I'm always conscious of for players that, okay, are you 19 and you're still in the under 21s, and you've got someone who's 16 who's now jumped to you and is now playing first team, or you've got two players who've done that, or you've got three players. The likelihood of you actually playing at that club longer term or getting 50
slim.
games, it's going to be very slim. And so looking at, okay, if you're 18 and it's not really happened, I think you've got to start looking on loan. Personally, I think you've got to start looking, where can I actually get professional football experience, 2 leagues down, 3 leagues down, abroad, to really start getting a feel for men's football.
I don't think you're alone with that, man, because I always say on my videos, minutes are currency. Obviously, as you
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
crucially, it's a case by case basis. It can't be a one shoe for all kind of approach. But I always say, if you're a talented player at Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, any of the bigger clubs,
mm,
yeah, and you've been there for a number of years and you get released, if you're kind of floating your name or your agents doing their job and floating your name about at lower clubs, I'm sure when your profile lands on a manager's office, they might say, "Oh, well, Arsenal did it." They'll listen, but then when they get into the nuts and bolts, how many career appearances have they played and all of that kind of stuff, they might take you on, but they might not, because at the end of the day, as you know yourself, 3 points are on the line. I always say, in my opinion, 9 times out of 10, most managers, they're gonna go for that more experienced player. If 10 games is gonna give them,
yeah,
10 sixes out of tens, then that young player who might be, for the first 2 weeks, you're 100 out of 10, then you're a 4, then you're a 5. I just think you need to go and get games. And I think sometimes with certain academies, I feel some, like Chelsea, I think they do it very good in that it doesn't really matter to a degree what position you play. They kind of bring you through. But then I think you look at a team like Arsenal where, yeah, they still bring through players, but we all know it's more the technical kind of cute 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1s, which is all great. But if you're looking for a club and that club plays 4-4-2, is very direct football, and you're 5'8", you're a very cute player, and you're stuck on the left wing in the lower leagues where, as you said yourself, there's 3 points, there's results on the line, it can get a bit kind of techie, which leads me to another talking point. Yeah,
just on
obviously,
that
into
quickly, CJ.
go on.
Yeah, just because I think it's also important to recognize, what are the types of positions that are coming through in academies when we look at the Prem as an example. Are you going to see centre backs and centre midfielders coming through academies in the Prem?
Not really. It's easier to play the
Very,
attackers.
yeah, strikers. Are you really seeing it at the Prem level? You know, even goalkeepers. My
Yeah, I
big
saw
one
your
is
tweet about it.
goalkeepers. Yeah, massive goalkeepers. It's harder for goalkeepers to be entrusted at the Premier League level to come through at 21, 22.
Facts. It's a
So
tall ask.
yeah, so for me, you've also got to consider, okay, and this is where I think data analysis has to come into play when you talk about your own professional journey. I think you've got to really, players have to really start looking at, what are the percentages here where actually positions are also coming through. And even when you look at if we talk about England here and look at the England first team as an example, look at, for example, the centre midfielders, how they've come through. Declan Rice was obviously, he was obviously released from Chelsea before then making it at West Ham, isn't it? In that regards. Look at the goalkeepers, where they come from the lower leagues. Look at the centre backs, where the centre backs come from. Where the fullbacks come from? Of course, Kyle
They've
Walker,
earned their
where he
chops.
started off from Sheffield, Sheffield United. So I think it's really important for players to understand that as they're coming through the academy, to look at, if they want to be at the top level, look at where players have come from, what their journeys have been, and study that a bit more.
Why do you think they don't do that enough then? Like, is it a thing where you're caught in your own bubble of just being a young player? Football's all you kind of known. Maybe you've got people around you kind of telling you to do this, but you're kind of brushing it off. I'm not criticizing the clubs here, but
Yeah,
obviously a club's going to tell you you're special or you're valued in things like any walk of life, any workplace. And then you're useful until you're useless, essentially. And you're left picking up the pieces. Because I see it a lot, man. I see a lot of like talented 17, 18-year-old lads. You see it in the papers. A club is
yeah,
begging them to stay. They sign a new deal. And then they get to the end of their contract. Everyone kind of forgets they're there. They don't really kick on as expected. And it kind of is what it is.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Of course, at the end of the day, the club needs to win games. They they want to bring through, and I wouldn't say they don't. They of course want to bring through players, but you also have to be at a certain level. You have to come and you're, and this is a thing that players need to realize. You are coming to take the position of someone who's played 200 games potentially.
And cost
That's
millions of
that's
quid sometimes.
cost millions of pounds. It's not an easy task to do, and I think one of the things probably we could do more of in academies is to help with that reality. We've talked about Ethan a few times here. Many games you're going to have to come off the bench in academies, especially up to under 16s. You're playing a certain number of minutes. You have to play a certain number of minutes. Okay, 40 minutes now. You've got to play on. That's not reality. That's not reality. Once
That's
you
a good
get there,
point.
the reality is that you may be sitting on the bench for 2, 3 games, 4 games without actually getting on, 5 games without actually getting on.
And then
Then you get
like
on,
this
you've got ten
climate where
minutes.
you're playing week in, week out
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
injuries. It's
ex-
weird.
exactly. So, and then you're ready to take your opportunity, but you might have to you might have to get used to being an impact player for 10 games before you actually get a start, and then you may become an impact player again, and then you may get a couple of starts. And so that stop start in the sense of when you are in the team from minute zero, it's got to be recognized as a player.
I think that's an interesting one, man. But if we like look at the first team, I do think I always say it in my vids as well. Obviously, when a lad is talented, like one, I always say when a young player is talented, that's great. But let's just let them develop and do what they're doing
Hmm.
because they've got to learn. I think in today's day and age, if I'm 16 and I score from 30 yards, I'm gonna be world class. I'm a star in the making. Everyone sees me as a star as tomorrow. But everybody forgets, yeah, like before Lewis Hamilton could be the F1 guy that he is. He had to learn how to drive a car. Like it's not an easy
Yeah,
thing. You've
yeah,
got to do it week in, week out. And I think in this day and age of social media is crazy. But one thing I think is underrated, and you've kind of indirectly touched on it, is the physical aspect of football. I'm not talking necessarily being strong in duels and things. I think that goes without saying. But academy football, there is a large part of your life where you're playing once, maybe twice a week. The results don't really
yeah,
mean much. Then you get into the first team where a team like Arsenal for the best part of the season, there's 3 games in 10 days. You're playing every week, twice a week, 3 games in 10 days. You have to recover a lot. And as you would
yeah,
know better than me, for a teenager, there's the physical aspect going through puberty and your body recovering and whatnot. And at the end of the day, you have to go through all of this. But if you get a chance, you kind of still have to take it. So it's like, how much of the physical aspect do you think is slept on in once a young boy progresses into the first team?
I think now the physicality aspect is definitely planned out. Is I think it's planned out well from a young age. They, whether it be maturation, whether it be peak height velocity, things of that nature, whether it be gradually loading muscle, what have you. One of the things that's probably still up for debate is those who are under maturated, whether they
Mm,
still get the longevity within academies, and actually it's a case of we will take you because we know that your peak height velocity, etc., it's not going to happen until you're 18, where
like Joe
you'll
Willock.
actually, yeah. And so I think that's still something that's up for debate. I know there are many parents who still find that challenging, who've had undermaturated kids, who have gone through academies. Of course, there has to be a level of physical physical capabilities for you to be able to handle first team football, which is why you see again Miles, who he's quite stocky, if you like, if you want to say for a better word, and he's able to handle some of those physical battles. But then I think it's also representative of our leagues. But when you look across in, for example, Spain, you wouldn't necessarily say in terms of physical specimens they are the same
Even the
profile.
goalies are tiny. Like it's
Yeah,
crazy when I watch Spain at youth level.
exactly. And so I think it's really important to recognize that, okay, yes, we have these, maybe these profiles in UK, but actually when you look abroad, and case in point, when we see what happened in the Euros,
Yeah,
probably had the better physical specimens, but
didn't
Spain
win the
still
trophy.
won and dominated and controlled the game. And I think this is where we need to really consider how we are setting up our players as best as possible for the future game. If we want them to be as successful as possible on the international stage.
So where do you see the game going then? Because I'm
Yeah,
29 in my life. I've seen it go from like you. Who would I say? Let's say like the Jaden Sancho's, the Ezes, any of them ballers, like the Jogo Bonito kind of guys, the guys that would be first picking the cages when you're a
yeah,
little kid. I feel in the first part of my life, them kind of players would get into academies and whatnot, but that kind of stuff would be coached out of them. Like if you're a winger, get out your feet, cross it, boom, do what you're doing. Then I think there was a stage where people said, or some coaches said, you know what, actually, we've got to find a way for it to work. Like we need them to change and play how we need them to, but we need that kind of healthy randomness, that showmanness, that kind of in the last few years or moving on, like that kind of street footballer was kind of praised. Then I think we've got to a world where it's not necessarily that they're for or against it. It's like systems and athletes first rather than, your technical level. Not necessarily, you can never negate the technical level, but you know what I mean, innit? Like it's more of a
I do,
tactical and
I do.
systemic game.
Yeah, I do. And actually, I saw something from Fabregas, and Fabregas was saying that he if he had Pep Guardiola near the end of career, he thinks he would have played longer than he did, because he saw that come in, and it was something for him. He had to adapt, try and adapt to it, the high physical nature that had come into play, and the really heavy systems that we're now seeing. When you look at academy football, you could swap the shirts of teams at times, and they're trying to play the same way, the same type of systems. And you're looking and you're thinking, who's the player who's going to be actually someone who's going to do something that you haven't really coached, and is going to do something completely different, completely as a maverick. Don't get me wrong, you can't have those all over the pitch, but I think the systems are starting from a really low age. And even when I talk to grassroots coaches at times, and some of the things that are being said, I think to myself, this is concerning. You're talking to me about formations and things at under seven.
It should all about be using different surfaces of the
Yeah,
foot and
come
get
on.
comfortable with
Let's
football, man.
let's let's be serious here. Talk about formations at that age. He's not trying to win Champions League. Come on. So
That threw me
I
off.
think it's true. It's true.
That's
Even with the
mad.
just a quick one. Even with the format that's coming out, the new FA format for 3v3 from a younger age, which should have been done from a while ago, and thankfully it's coming in 2 years time or 3 years time. If it could be sooner, it'd be great. But some of the coaches were saying, "Oh, what happens to the goalkeepers, development goalkeepers?" Come on, these are 6-year-olds. Talking about development of goalkeepers at six. Come on.
They better just be having fun, man.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So for me, one of the things that I think is critical, that we need to give them a varied experience. Playing against obviously different teams abroad is really helpful for them to see the difference in how they play. And when I actually interviewed a coach from Espanyol, Michael Paul Carrez, one of the things that he said is that in Spain, they don't understand how you develop technique isolated. It's always technique in relation to a decision you have to make.
I agree with that.
And that's actually something that I learned when I was at Fulham, where which we did quite a lot. We did developing technique in relation to a decision you have to make in with other players. So if you're trying to develop outside foot passing, it wouldn't just be something that you do as an isolated technical
Yeah,
practice.
match
You
situation
do it
kind of
like a
thing.
3v3 exactly, where you'd have to recognize the moments of how to do it, distances, speed, all that type of stuff. So I would definitely say that, but this is where it comes to the continued organization of football from younger ages, as opposed to, all right, the ball's just hit off the curb. Now I've got to react to that, react to different bounces, put my body in different ways to be able to receive and shield the ball.
I think you're bang on the money, man. And like as you said that, going back to whether it was the South Africa example you gave or the ball hitting the curb, I got no way of proving this, but every now and again, like someone like Mahrez, like obviously at some point he's been
Yeah,
exposed to professional coaches, great
yeah,
coaches, all of that. But the way they dribble and do things, or I watch football sometimes and I'm
it's
like, you
different.
weren't taught that. Yeah, you learned that. Like
Yeah.
you knew to do that. Like Luka Modric with the outside of his foot.
Oh, I
Like
love
it don't
Luka
make
Modric's
sense.
best
No one
player
doing
I've
that.
seen doing that outside foot. I love Luka Modric as a
The
centre midfield
power he
player.
puts in that as well. People
Oh,
underestimate it.
phenomenal! And what I love about outside, I know we're slightly
Now
digressing, but
go
what I love
ahead, man.
about
This is why you're
outside
here.
what I love about outside foot passing is that there's minimum backlift, so it means that the opposition have little time to be able to react. When you're able to play on that front foot, it allows you to be able to manipulate the ball differently. And back to Mahrez as well. If you see from Mahrez, a lot of the time when he received the ball, he'd receive it with sole up, and instead of actually taking it with the inside foot or outside foot. Again, different technique to be able to manipulate the ball quickly. And obviously, he was very effective at Man City and of course at Leicester City. So yeah, back to your point. Definitely, I think this is something that, who knows how it's going to be in the future. You just hope that within the UK there's some way. Now we're seeing with Ballers League. Who knows? We could see it with players coming out of Ballers League. Maybe they may do it from younger ages. So I know, of course, we've got those who are older, but it might be Ballers League starting from under 12s, and maybe you start seeing some of those players coming out of Ballers League into academies and then going first team.
I mean, it would be nice, man, because I think one thing I've liked about the present day is, I mean, people have always come through non-league, but it feels like it's more feasible that you can be picked up at non-league now. Or it seems like there's a bit
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
lights on non-league now. You still have
yeah.
typically players that have been released from academies gone non-league. It's not necessarily someone that's never been in academy. There's obviously examples like that. It's interesting you mentioned with the soul up because I can't remember. I think it was Deserby. He was speaking about that very same technique, and he said he had a player who done it, and for the life of him, he couldn't work out why, and he got quite angry at him. And then he said, "I'm going to speak to him." And he said, subconsciously, when you receive the ball with your soul up, it makes somebody think you can press them, kind of thing, and it allows you to do stuff.
Mhm,
So it
mhm.
goes back to what you said about having a technique, but like a game situation, so you immediately know why it's being used. Because I do think that
Yeah,
with
and
footballers,
think about it. You can move
go
the
on,
ball in any different direction with the sole of with the sole of your feet, with the sole of your foot. But if it's just the inside, it's only really one, two ways
yeah.
you can go with it. But it allows you to be able to spin on the ball in a different way.
What do you think of the DNA in England? Because I actually think there's good coaching going
Big
on. There's good.
question.
Yeah, I know. I have to, man, because I think there are like yourself. There's some good coaches. There's people that are doing good things, but I do think it's a bit technical. Now you look at yourself. When you were speaking at the beginning, I thought to myself that in theory, no one can have no excuses because the level of difficulty was there. You've made it happen regardless. Like you didn't have any like nepotism or anything. You made it happen regardless. But there is a financial barrier. I do look at someone like Graham Potter who kind of had to leave to kind of get his foot in the game. I don't really
Yeah,
see that in England. And I would also say, I'm not going to say England doesn't have a DNA, but in my 29 years, even going as an aspiring footballer myself, when the Brazilians were on top, it was all about Brazil. When the Spain
yeah.
tiki-taka stuff, it's
It's
all
all about
about that.
Spain.
And then so on and so forth. It doesn't feel like England's ever had like its own kind of thing. Maybe I'm making it up, but yeah, where's your thoughts with that?
I think you've answered the question. If you can't see it, then we don't really have it. I think that you should be someone who is not a coach should be able to say what our style of play is. Anyone
Exactly.
can, if we can see what Brazil was in the, for example, that 2002 World Cup, if we can see what Spain was in the World Cup that they won and the Euros that they won, that means that there's a clear DNA. And it doesn't mean that you have to know the level of detail around it, but you should
But you
just
just
be
have
able
to
to
see it.
see it on the surface. I think that's then the issue. That's the issue. We can't. And I know obviously Gareth Southgate was trying to do, we're trying to develop it alongside. I know Dan Ashraf were there at the time and produce a real DNA. Of course, we got closer throughout the time when Gareth Southgate was there. But I think something that we haven't considered is also the continued, and this is a side note, but the continued pressure from the media of and the badge and the weight of the badge and playing for England. I think at times that really shadowed a
They
lot of
big you up to
things.
tear you down. Let's be brutally honest, man. And
Yeah,
that's happening
yeah,
and gonna keep happening.
yeah. And unfortunately, I think that pressure, unless that pressure goes and keep talking about 60, 66, of course, there's pride there, but there's going to come a point where 66 was 100 years ago.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're gonna get close, man. If we don't buck up
We're
our
getting
ideas.
closer. You know, next year is going to be 80 years. Is going to be 80 years. So, sorry, 60 years. So now we're
It's
getting closer
irrelevant,
to
not
100 years
irrelevant,
that
but
we
it is
were.
relevant. And that's the saddest thing, man. It's like it's annoying because you can almost see it. You see it with every young player, and I pray that it's not always the case. But they big you up, you're the darling, and it's like this. It's even the same people really that big you up. They're the ones
Yeah,
that are going to tear you down, which is sad. But I don't think it's ever going to stop. I just think that is a society thing, unfortunately, in this country. And as I said at the start, I think society mirrors football and vice versa. So talk to me about Arsenal, then, man. At some point, you rocked up at
of course.
Arsenal. You're in the academy. Talk to me about it.
Arsenal, brilliant academy, brilliant. Led by Per Mertesacker, obviously ex pro, ex Arsenal World Cup winner. Uh, by the way, taller than I thought. He's a
She's
tall
saying
guy.
that like, he looks tall
Yeah,
on TV, so God knows what he looks like.
tall guy, and he's just yeah, I have nothing but great words to say about Per. Top guy. He will, I would listen to things that he would say. For example, I remember having a conversation with him and said, "Oh, we almost, this was a couple of years ago. Oh, we almost made it." But he said, "But did we? Were we better this year than we were last year? Has the progress been made?" Yeah, great. How many of the players have come through? And he'd remember the names of kids from under nines right the way through. He knew the players were, and so he was very much invested in the academy, and you can see his longevity there at the moment, which is great. Arsenal, what I liked about it is especially the closeness in all the pitches. So you had uh, 3 or 4 pitches really close together, and then you had the dome, and it felt very enclosed in that way, as opposed to sometimes you go to some academies and it's really spread out where all the
One team's
pitches are,
parked off
one's
over
there, one's
there and
there.
whatnot. Segregated to
Exactly.
a degree.
But you could look over and see, okay, what are the youngers doing? Then you could look over and see what the olders doing, and they could also see that as well and see that progression. I thought that was brilliant, and it really helped with the buzz of training. And then, of course, the players who were there. My time there, I definitely, if you want to say the level of player across the board, I probably coached the best level of player that I'd coached at Arsenal than any other club.
What players did you come across, if any?
So many of those who are now starting to come through. Of course, the one who's making the most headlines, Max Dowman. By the time I was
Player.
there, Ethan and Mars were already playing 2 age groups above. Um, those who also have now moved on, so Aiden Heaven,
Doing his
Chido
thing at
Obi,
United.
yeah, Jack Porter, who made his debut in goal,
Made his
actually, the
debut in goal, yeah.
16-year-old. It was brilliant because I remember him when he came on trial, and being able to see him 4.5 years later making his debut.
Must
It's
be
like,
weird for you, man, with
it's like
that.
brilliant. Oh, but do you know what? It's because I've seen it I've seen it over many years. It's just great to see them get there, of course, and be able to see them get onto the screen, and play. And of course, you want them to be able to have a
You want
career.
to see them go all the way.
Exactly. So not just making that debut and then that's it, but actually going as far as they can in their journey. So there are many who probably in the next, I would say, 2, 3, 4 years, people will start seeing in the game. But
I
those are
mean,
those are the main ones, and who people probably know.
I'm trying to urge. I mean, we're all urging caution, but it's like it's hard not to be excited about Max Dolman. Like, what makes it like for someone that's seen him up close? Like, what was
Yeah.
he like? I mean, has he always been playing up ages? Was he a shy lad that came alive when the football was there, or is he confident without a football and with
Yeah.
one? Like, what is it all like, man? Like, let us know everything, Max, man.
So with Max, and of course he's still a young player, still making his way. When I first got there, I just heard about Max because he was in the younger age groups. I just heard about him. I was like, oh, okay, people talking about Max Dowman. Okay. Then the next year, the age group that I was coaching, he was playing age group up. It's like, okay, this
There
confident
might be
lad.
something here.
By the time it got to his age group, the only time he played with us was when we had a tournament. He was already playing up with older age groups, and then he made his debut for the under 16s at 13, and then he then made his debut for the under 18s at 13 years of age as well, and it was really just he just went on from there.
Just doing that.
The, what I loved about Max is that he was just humble. He just wanted to play football. His whole aim, his whole focus was that I just want to play football, and he was never phased by the next challenge ever. He was never phased by the next challenge. He always wanted to have the next challenge that would help him to progress forward as a player. And you can of course see that. You can of course see that now. We saw that in the FA Youth Cup. You can of course see he's training with the first team as
Went
well.
over to Dubai recently with them as
Went over
well.
to Dubai. Yeah,
Oh, I still a
exactly.
school kid. Psst,
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously it's key
crazy.
to remember that. But I know fans are already shouting for him to make his debut. You
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 can't
can't
control that, man.
yet uh, because there's a rule when it comes to when you've turned 15. Um, and who knows? Potentially next year he could be making his debut. You never know, League Cup or something like that. But for him, one of the key things that you see throughout, and obviously people are just seeing it, but I had the pleasure of seeing it throughout the academy, is his ability to carry the ball. His ability to carry the ball
Crazy.
wherever he was, he just had the ability to carry the ball, to protect the ball, and then carry it. But what was really key was no matter where he received it, not taking that out of him. So even if he received it, if 20 yards from goal, backwards turned, okay, let's see what you do with it. Of course, you'll help coach and different ways you can receive,
And
etc.
guide
But
him in ways, yeah.
yeah, but one of the things I love is that, and I think we do need to see more of it at times, is that is that mechanism whereby you receive back to goal and the defender thinks they've just about got you, but you know
And then
exactly what
drop
you're
a
doing,
shoulder, you're gone.
and you're able to turn, spin. You see it from Ronaldinho all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
it
my
was
God.
like every single week he was doing it, and I think we need more of that because you're able to then take out two players at once, and that's something that I do
Facts.
think needs to be seen more. And you obviously see that with Max. Can you take out two players at once? Because as soon as you do that, there's a ridiculous amount of space that will open up. Because you've already taken two, three players out the game for you to be able to counterattack, etc. And that's going to be definitely a key trait of Max going forwards as a player.
Where do you think he ends up like in terms of position? Is it 10? Is it 8? Is it like a Grealish kind of inside forward? Is it everything in the modern day? I don't know.
Good question. So, of course, you end up when you make your debut, you probably make your debut potentially in a position that you never played in most of the time in the academy. So like Miles ended up making his debut left back when he played more so centre midfield. Ethan again more so played 10 but made it in the right wing. So potentially it might be that right wing position as well. Obviously we know Saka locked that down
Yeah.
as star boy. But who knows? It could be on that left hand side that Max makes his debut. It could be fullback. You just never
You
know.
never know in this game.
You really never know. But the one thing that you have to have is the technical ability to manage the ball. If you've got the technical ability to manage the ball, then you'll be able to get onto the pitch. If you don't have that technical ability to manage the ball, does not matter.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you can see, I say reflected in all academies, but obviously with Arsenal, you said it there with Dolman. I definitely see it with Ethan and I see it with Lewis Skelly. The ability to drop a shoulder or manipulate or not panic as well. Like you can
Yeah.
see the Arsenal ethos with all of them. And it's fantastic to see them through the pathway. And you know what? Hopefully in a few years, they're all starting it together. I always say I've got the
That'd be
impossible.
great.
It'd be great. I got the
It'd be
impossible
brilliant.
dream that's not going to happen of 11 Haylenders from goalkeeper to striker. I want to see
Why?
that before I
Why
die.
not? Why not? You know, if Barcelona can do it,
You see what I'm saying?
why not Haaland? Why not?
This is it. This is it, man. Like, who would you say has got a higher ceiling? My last question for you, then, between Wanyeri and Dolman. Of course, you're not a fortune teller, but just humor me, man.
Oh, this is a very difficult question.
Probably the hardest question of the lot, man.
It definitely is. Because they both got that steely. You can see that steely mentality from both of them. I would I would probably I would probably say they're both going to do incredibly well. I hope. Maybe Ethan.
That's an interesting one. I hope it's still a debate, man. And it's nice to see out of not out of nowhere, because everybody's known about them if you worked at Arsenal, but out of nowhere, you've got two potentially generational talents or top players for Arsenal. You've got Lewis Skelly over there, you've got Saka. You've obviously seen many a player come through our system and do things. And above everything, yeah, like obviously it's great for us fans. It's good for the parents and it's good for the coaches like yourself that have helped them along the way or worked with them and whatnot,
Yeah.
because there must be no better feeling for the people at Hayland or, as you mentioned, Cambridge, Spurs, Fulham, Arsenal, to see that happening. And then obviously they come through. They typically, I guess, go back to Hayland, talk with the little kids that are there. And it just keeps it all going and keeps people motivated. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to see. There's nothing better than seeing academy players come through. My last question for you then, man. Like, we haven't touched on it. Obviously, you're a coach. I know
Yeah.
about your journey, but like, you do a lot of other stuff with trying to help coaches and
Yeah.
webinars and all of those things. Let us know a bit about that and where people can find that.
Sure. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is coaches who want to be able to work with some of the best talented players in the country. And the first thing is that coaches don't understand actually the percentages in terms of being within academies, whether it be under nines through to under 21s. And it's approximately about 0.1% of coaches who end up
Damn.
working within academies of those who coach across the country. And it's only getting even more challenging, of course, with a number of coaches coming into the game. So what I do is I help coaches to have the strategies and blueprints to be able to work within academy football. What's been great is I've had two who've already gone to Arsenal, one gone into Chelsea, and one going to the women's game as example. So that's something that I do. I do it on a program called the Coach Accelerator Masterclass. So it's a community of coaches who are all focused on that goal. And as you mentioned, in terms of webinars, of course, courses are going to be crucial to your journey. So I am doing 3 UEFA B application webinars this month. So helping coaches to be successful in that. And then also networking. Networking is more critical than coaches understand. And I always put it this way: qualifications are your dress code, but your network is your ticket. And so one of the things I'm doing is in May 25th, Merky FC got coaches coming from professional academies, and it's going to be a small exclusive event, 50 coaches who want to be a part of that and network with those in the game.
I mean, I just when I had more, I had admiration for you. I didn't think I could have more for you because, like, you know what? It's one thing putting yourself on and doing your own thing. It's another thing giving back to people that have the same aspirations, sorry, as yourself. And I mean, there's nothing I can say, but I take my hat off to you, man. That's amazing stuff, man. I'm gonna make sure all of the things are in the bios and
Appreciate it.
whatnot. But it's always nice to hear out the horse's mouth. Like, where can people find you?
Sure. So really active on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's a
Very.
great place. If you're a coach, you have to be on LinkedIn. Have to. It's absolutely essential. So LinkedIn, I'm on X as well, Instagram, TikTok, but not as much. Mainly on LinkedIn and X, and it's at Coach Temisan. Sometimes at Coach underscore Temisan. And lastly, if you just want to receive insights from me on a weekly basis, I've got a coach newsletter which goes out to over 2,700 coaches every week, and you can receive that on a weekly basis. Again, free to sign up to.
By the time this video comes out, people, everything will be in the bio. So just click, have a browse, do what needs to be done, man. T, this has been a fantastic
Thanks
way
for
to
having me on.
start my morning. Pardon?
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, CJ. It's been
No,
great.
man, it's
You're a
always
brilliant
it's
host.
I hear that, man. I mean, as long as I can make my guests feel comfortable, and I can dive into their life and their story, and we can produce good content. That's all I want to know, man. And it's been great, man, to hear what you've said about your coaching journey. The young stuff with Arsenal. I think the thing I enjoyed the most is how passionate you are. Football's one thing, but how passionate you are about like learning languages, like life skills, and investing, and just setting yourself up for all eventualities that happen with football, man. So yeah, man, this has been an eye opener. It's been great, man. All your stuff will go in the bio. People, let us know your thoughts. Again, check out the bio. All the information is there if you have coaching ambitions and aspirations. T, I'm gonna let you get on with your day, man. Thank you for doing this, my guy.
Appreciate it, CJ. Top work again.
Come on, my guy. Bless. Speak soon.
Cheers. You too.
Peace.